So, how about if we all
Are you
stand?
telling him who you are so he
And
knows who's
welcome
talking
to the Township Board of Trustees meeting. Tristan, you want to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening again, and welcome to the Township Board meeting of Thursday, October 12th. And take a motion to approve the agenda.
I move.
Support.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and I guess we'll go ahead and get an approval for the consent agenda at the same time.
I move.
Support.
Okay. Motion supported. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we'll go to citizen comments and introduce anyone that would like to speak. I will start here on the left side of my room. Mr. Russian. Welcome. Just a reminder, we give all attendees a 3-minute time frame. That part we'll have to schedule after, but we'll take the introduction in the first 3 minutes then.
George Russian, 2441 Valley Lane Drive. And I'm going to bring up our sewer problem again. I brought it up last month where Hoffman raised it from $60 to $119.01, which is a 90% increase. Then she says, well, that's to balance the budget. Well, sure, balance the budget, but are you using that much sewer water? Then she says, well, you're paying what people have for water. Well, I thought about it, and I went and out and investigated. I got a water bill here. Person with water is paying $83.50. That's $35.51 more than our sewer bill. Then they get water, which they don't need a water softener, so forth, which we do. Then their sewer bill, what they pay for sewer, is $63.47, what their sewer bill is. That's $55.54 more than what we're paying. I can't believe it. What is she doing? So I don't know if you people can get what I'm coming from or what, but if their sewer bill is $63.47, and she says that's what we should be paying, why don't you roll back our sewer bill from $119 down to $63.47 and make it fair, where if they're paying that much, people with a well has to have a water softener, so forth, and paying that much to use the storage? That's ridiculous. So, is my 3 minutes up? I think I'm just about
No,
at
just
the
a
end.
minute. You've got 2 minutes.
Anyway, you told me to see Mr. Laddie last month?
I think there's always an open door for us.
Mr. Laddie, I still got your card.
Okay.
I called your office the next day, and they said they would get back at me.
Uh-oh.
I'm still waiting for a phone call.
Well, I'll give you that phone call tomorrow.
Pardon?
I'll give you that phone call tomorrow and we'll set up a meeting.
Okay. So I thought, well, maybe you might be busy, court dates and whatever, that happens where you're real busy and so forth and so on. So I don't know if you're gonna look into this, what Hoffman did to us by raising our sewer bill. Did she have the legal right to raise it? Did she take it on her own? Did any of the board members question her about raising our sewer bill like that? That's my problem. All I can ask is investigate it, look into it, and see if I'm right, what we should be paying and what they're paying. So I thank you. And I'm going to go home, but I'm not going to watch a football game. I'm going to watch Fox News. I'm boycotting the football game. Remember that?
All right, thank you, Mr. Russian.
Appreciate the flag, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Mr.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
yes,
could I, while Mr. Russian was still here, could I comment on,
Mr. Russian.
George? I understand that the way, and maybe Mr. Laddie could interject or Mr. Lehman, but the way that the standard rate for, flat rate for sewer, for customers that don't have city water, municipal water, township water, shame on me, but there's no way of measuring the intake, so you can't measure the output. So there was some formula that was generated before I got back on the board in 2010. And I think maybe for future positioning, Mr. Chairman, maybe we ought to take a look at what is the average water user customer paying for their discharge in sewer? And certainly, I think Mr. Russian's got a point. The flat rate user shouldn't be paying more than what our average people are paying on their sewer bill that have municipal water, right? I mean, I don't even know how that formula ever came to the number that it is. Like you said, 115 every 119 every 3 months. But
It's, the county sets that number, Clark.
the county sets
The
the number,
county's got
but
the
all
number.
townships have to charge that?
No, they do in part. What has happened is when, and Genesee County uses an REU, a residential equivalency unit, and it was created primarily for sewers, and it studies, they call it the 10-state standards. It's basically a Midwest, survey of Midwest states, and this dates back into the 60s, basically, and they set up essentially an average of what the average household would put out, and also the average amount of water that they use. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking it's, the formula's in the county sewer ordinance. And maybe it's 142 gallons a day or something like that, but it's the same, it's based on whatever the standard has been accepted throughout the Midwest. And what the county does when they can't pinpoint the water usage that you use, because you're exactly right, water in equals water out, they will take basically the high average, and they'll assign it to everybody who's unmetered. Now, whether that's fair or not, I'll leave to you to decide, but it's the same all over it's essentially the same all over the state of Michigan. Their rates are different in Genesee County, but the measure of volume is the same.
So, Mr. Chairman, then the rate, anybody in Genesee County then is paying the same rate as we're paying out here in Grand Blanc for that standard sewer charge?
As far as the county for an REU, as far
Yes,
as
that's
what the
what I
county
mean, yes.
considers an REU, yes.
So, you know, I gotta tell you,
But let
Mike-
me just say though, the prices are different, right? Each community you go to may have a different cost of moving that sewer.
For that,
yes,
right,
for
but
that municipality.
the measure or standard that they're using to develop that is the same.
An REU is an REU.
I gotta tell you, you may have explained that before. If you have, I didn't understand it or wasn't listening, but I didn't know that. And maybe Mr. Russian won't even need to call you or talk to you tomorrow. Did you know that, what he just said? It isn't Grand Blanc Township, it's basically countywide based on a state formula.
No, Hoffman did this.
No, she didn't do it.
She,
She couldn't do it on her own.
I'm gonna give Mr. Russian's phone number while you guys move on.
oh, okay.
Okay.
But if you're done with your question.
Yeah, I am. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right,
She didn't do it.
we're going to move on. Who else over here would like to speak? On the left? Sure. Welcome, good evening.
Thank you. Good evening. Lisa Easterwood, 8236 Nichols Road, Gaines Township. I'm here on behalf of the Grand Blanc Historic District Commission. I'm an advisor to that commission, and I just wanted to give you an update on
Yeah, here, just a moment, Lisa.
okay. Just wanted to give you an update on 3 things that are going on with the commission. Last Sunday, we had our 7th annual Fall Pioneer Day event, and it was very successful. One of the most successful we've had. We had over 130
Great.
visitors, had 25 plus or minus volunteers. We had the state representative, Tim Sneller, was there with his associate, and he was very positive and thought it was a great event and had a great time. We had the tractor club displaying vintage tractors. We had an archaeological dig going on, which as you know, we have that at every Pioneer Day event. We had reenactors with a Civil War camp set up, and we had crafts for the kids. They were making covered wagons and cornhusk dolls, and we had a caramel apple stand. And we also had a donut eating contest. But I don't know who won that, because I was too busy doing other stuff. But anyways, it was a great event. Everybody had a good time. The weather was beautiful. Second thing, the floors in the kitchen are done, and in the back breakfast nook and back door area, So that was done with a donation, as you know, from the Grand Blanc Heritage Association, so we're very thankful to them for that. And the last thing is the kitchen floor, or kitchen remodel plans. Those are being revised and are soon to be done and ready for putting out for bids. So that's moving along as well. And I think other than that, that was all of the things that I needed to cover, so.
Very good.
Thank you very much, Lisa.
Thank you.
Okay, moving, sure, go ahead, sir. Good evening.
Good evening. James Ito, 2332 Village Woods Drive in Grand Blanc. I just wanted to let you know that as for Grand Blanc, I've been elected as a member of the Grand Blanc Little League Board of Directors. We just actually have a new board that was just elected. So I just wanted to let you know as a party inside the community of Grand Blanc that our board of directors are Carl Mervin, Holly Corbett, Daryl Raymond, myself, James Ito, Ben Rupo, Craig Rombach, and Dante Benettini. So I just wanted, we're new, some of us are new to the board, and so we're trying to figure out what we need to do. We're in a transition period right now for this month to hopefully start working on what we need to do for our relationship with Parks and Rec, as well as preparing for next year as we get ready for another season of that, as well as trying to compete for Grand Blanc for the Little League World Series that represents the state of Michigan, hopefully, in there. So that's it.
Fabulous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. And good luck.
Thank you.
Who else do we have for public comment? Would anyone in the back row there like to speak? Mr. Ert? Good evening.
Good evening, Ed Hurd, 7212 Porter Road. I'm really glad we revised that paper in the packet for the CDBG money. It looks good, it makes sense, I understand it, thank you.
All right,
Go ahead with it.
okay.
By the way, I think I made the wrong meeting last night. I went to the Dort Highway Extension meeting next door.
I was just spotted out.
That was pretty bad. Anyhow, I apologize for some of our residents.
That was fine.
I should have made the city's meeting. That's the one I should have made. So I ask you to stay your course, okay? This board's done a good job. We know what we want to accomplish. So, and I don't think the city's waiting on us for anything. We're waiting to see how they're going to fund their portion. We're the ones waiting. I was curious, I heard something. Do we have a lease, I know our fire chief is here this evening, and maybe he knows the answer to this. Do we have a lease agreement with Station 2 and 3 with the fire commission and the training tower?
You're asking, does the township lease
Yeah,
our buildings to the fire commission?
yeah. I heard the city does that.
I
If
see
they
our
are,
attorney
maybe
and
we
our
should be.
superintendent saying
So
no.
I just want to bring that up. I mean, is that true, or I don't know. If it is, it's ridiculous.
We're not leasing.
I never heard of such a thing. I know we're not leasing, we're not doing it. But if somebody else in our partnership is doing that, it's ridiculous. So,
Interesting.
that's enough on the fire department. Maybe I'll hear more about it this evening. And I will only bring this up one more time this week. Parks and Recs. 45-year-old agreement, we need to update it, please. And someone else brought this to my attention, and Mr. Russian's not here. But the sewer rate that we talk about many years ago, and I don't know, maybe it was 10 years ago, 8 years ago, or something like that. The county came up with a new factor of how to figure out your sewer rate. I disputed it at the county level. I only have one, at the time I had 2 people in my house, now I have, well, 2 people in my house for 1 sewer rate, but anyhow. And it's basically 3.5 people in a household. And that's how the county did it. I talked to the county, I was down there. It is what it is. Mrs. Hoffman didn't do that. She don't have the authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ert.
So why didn't Mickey raise the rates on Mr. Rushing's house?
Any other comments from the public? Okay, very good. I think we're ready to move on. Thank you very much for your comments. Moving on to the approval of the minutes. We have September 12th, September 14th, 26th, both regular and executive sessions that we're looking for a motion either for individual motions or one for the whole group of them.
Mr. Chairman, make a motion that we approve all minutes listed, items A through E.
Support.
Okay, there's a motion, support, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving past these consent agenda items. I'm not sure we need to do anything on those. We already approved that. The zoning issue is moving to letter A. The board will consider a motion to grant an extension of the conditional rezoning for 5055 Perry Road for construction of a Speedway gas station.
Support.
Any discussion?
I have a question.
Mr. Massey?
When construction is in place, who determines how the traffic is going to be directed?
You mean for the construction project?
How you get
If
around
there-
the
if it's
construction
diverted?
project?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. Mr. Laddie?
Of when construction's occurring, not
Yeah,
when the
when-
site's built out.
When the construction occurs, who directs the traffic?
Good question. I don't know, I don't want to put Mr. Hill on the spot, but
They're
I don't know the
represented.
answer to
ahead and
that.
do it.
Sure. Go ahead, Mr. Hill.
If it's within a public, county public road, the site plan development would have to go to road commission for approval, and one of the things they look at is traffic control during construction. And so it's ultimately the road commission who approves the traffic control.
Probably when they're doing the curb cuts is about the only time they'd be interfering maybe or tapping into water. Yes, Mr. Thomas?
Supervisor, just real quick, how long are we granting the extension for in the motion?
1 year.
Probably should have that read in the
Mr.
motion.
Laddie, is that for a 1-year period?
That's correct.
Does that need to be in the motion or?
I think it's a good idea to have it in there.
I
Okay,
include those things.
okay. Any other discussion on this issue?
So you do have a motion and a second. Is it
Yes.
okay to amend it to add the year? Does
Yes.
the maker-
Is that okay?
to that, yes.
Is that all right, Mr. Massey, to add the 1 year?
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item B, the board will consider a motion to grant extension of the conditional rezoning for 1435 East Hill Road for a demolishment and rebuild of a Speedway gas station, and that would also be for a 1-year period.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Mr. Massey?
Question. Since we have 1 year for each, I have a question.
Sure.
What happens if it's not completed within 1 year?
Well, I think, and I see that Mr. LaBalle is ready to address you, and maybe I'll let him answer, because maybe we won't need to get to that question.
Well, when we submitted our initial request, we submitted it for 2 years. The issue with the station on Hill Road is we have a tenant who has the right to possess the property until June of 2018. They also have the option for an additional year that would extend the lease through May of 2019. We have been having ongoing discussions with this tenant to see what their future plans are. We were informed this week that they have purchased some property in Mundy Township with the expectation that they're going to build a new facility there. Unfortunately, they have some issues with the township, and so the latest communication from our tenant is that there's a 90% chance that they will have to exercise their option, which would take them to May of 2019. Therefore, we're requesting a 2-year extension instead of a year extension.
Would you object if we considered the year extension tonight, and then you had the opportunity to come back in the event that you needed to for the additional year?
I don't think we'd have an objection. I think in the ordinance, there's no limit on how long the extension could be for, and I think 2 years would be probably more efficient time-wise. And look, if the tenant vacates the site, we can move quicker, but right now they have the right to possess it to 2019, and we think they're probably going to do that.
My, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Massey?
My experience has been when you extend something for a long period of time, what happened, the parties look at that extension and say, hey, we really don't have to do anything until probably about 6 months prior to the expiration date. And then they'll come back and ask for another extension. So I agree with Attorney Ladd, if he still stands on his first comment, that for 1 year, and if you see fit that it needs to be extended beyond that, then at that time it requires a new set of eyes and a new discussion.
Well, and I do stand by that. It could be, they're giving you a heads up that probably the circumstances aren't going to change, but that isn't going to be
Mr. Kent?
that's not a fact that's going to cause you any trouble in the future.
Right. Mr. Kent?
Yeah, I would agree with Trustee Massey. In fact, in my years on the board, I don't recall ever extending anything more than a year. I wouldn't want this to be kind of a precedent-setting case where we start extending 2, 3, 4 years on projects. I would much rather review this in a year.
Right.
Take a look at the circumstances and, you know.
Just so you understand, the time frame of the extension isn't up to Speedway, right? I mean, it's not our call, it's the tenant's call.
Yes.
And so we would like to begin construction as soon as they're out. We were to the point where we were going to offer them financial incentives to move. We would like to get started. We think this site needs improvement, and we would like to get in there as soon as possible. However, we have a pre-existing contract that prevents us to do that. So we're not going to delay when we get the right to do that, but right now our hands are tied.
Ms. Lane?
Personally, I've been working with Speedway, especially on the Hill and Ollie Drive, for well over a year. They have met multiple times with our members of our association, the residents in the area, and have been very cooperative. So I have every confidence that when they can move, they will move. It is the tenant that is the difficulty right now. So there is no doubt in my mind this is going to be an excellent facility, so.
Yeah, and I don't have any doubts of that either. I'm looking forward to seeing, the progress on it. I'd like to see that corner updated as well, sooner rather than later. And I have all the confidence that, Speedway is going to carry that out. But again, I think, in a year from now, we probably would be it's going to be the same board probably that is sitting here, God willing that nothing happens to any of us. But, and I don't think anybody's opposed to it that I've heard, but, and it's been approved once already. I just think, a precedent of going out 2 years and, variables can change over time. So I'd be more likely to go with the year right now and then come back and approve a second year if need be.
And it's
Mr.
not,
Leddy?
Mr. LaValle points out, there is not a limit to the number of times you can come back for
renewal?
Conditional rezoning, unlike site plans and unlike PUDs.
Okay.
So you'll have the opportunity to see it again.
Right.
Just
Mr.
a
Guzak?
question, Mr. Ladd. Is there any way in that motion that it would state it's approved for a year, but they are going to be coming back? I mean, because he obviously is going to have to come back.
Well,
So can we put that in there so that we would know that there's no reason to hinder them because it's being extended again? Because a lot of times if you have a lot of extensions, you're thinking, well, the guy's just stalling. They're not stalling because it's out of their hands. So I don't know if legally we can put that in that amendment, say it is approved for now, but we foresee it will be coming back because they can't start. Unless the guy sells his lease, gets out of his lease.
Yeah, Mr. Laddie and then Mr. Massey.
Two things that are going on in my head. First of all, they've explained to us that they've got circumstances that are essentially beyond their control. And if somebody made the motion to say, we want to extend the conditional rezoning for a period of 12 months due to the petitioner demonstrating that there were some delays that were beyond their control, you could do that. Also, though, we just passed the policy last month that we're not going to put too much information in our minutes beyond the action that we took.
Oh, okay, well,
So-
I'm just trying to get clarification.
But again, it's none of, we're all on the same page, right? I mean,
Right.
we're just talking about different timeframes, and nobody's disputing that there's a delay beyond their control, so.
Mr. Massey?
Attorney answered my question.
Wow.
And, if it's a year, 12 months from now, it'll be this board that is here unless something happens to somebody. I mean, we're not going
There's
anywhere.
no
so-
way he doesn't get an extension.
Yeah, so I don't think anybody's disputing the merits of the issues here. It's basically whether we want to go a year or longer. So I guess I'll entertain a motion if there's.
Well, we have a motion,
Oh, is
and
there?
as the motion maker, we could add to it, due to the constraints of a tenant not vacating the property. And that's an,
Yeah.
no,
I wouldn't.
okay.
Mr. Massey?
Well, what you're defining, and it's the way I'm interpreting it. We said 1 year, and it appears that we have an agreement for 1 year. But if I'm incorrect, please correct me, Clerk Lane. You actually is putting in there in words for 2 years without putting the number 2.
Well, I think we have a consensus that, I don't know, I could be wrong. Ms. Lane, are you okay with going with a year? Or?
I'm fine with going with a
Can we
year.
just
Okay.
restate the motion, Mr. Supervisor?
Sure. I think it was just basically that the board will,
Grant the conditional rezoning extension for 1 year for the demolishment and rebuilding of the Speedway Station at Ollie and Hill Road.
1435 East Hill Road.
Someone supported it?
Yes, Mr. Guzak did.
So, okay. Call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Ladd. Item C, the board will consider a motion to accept the planning commission recommendation to adopt the proposed rezoning. You can see the zoning map amendments of 2 parcels in the area commonly referred to as Technology Village, from Research and Development to Technology Park and Technology Village Center.
So moved.
Support.
Okay, it's moved and supported. Any discussion? Mr. Limita, anything you want to add?
No, I think you covered it pretty well at the committee of
Tuesday?
the whole on Tuesday.
Okay.
And this is really just the second part. You guys approved the actual zoning language amendments last month. And because of posting, we missed a posting deadline, the map amendments were following a month later. So it's really just a completion of what we started last month.
Okay, so there's been a motion, it's been supported. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Moving on to future positioning, the board will review the fiscal year 2018 proposed budget, and we discussed on Tuesday that at this meeting we were basically going to come up with a strategy for how we want to attack the review of the work that Mr. Limita has done with the department heads, and I think we had discussion, and I think there was consensus that we trust Mr. Limita and the department heads with the budget put together, and I think we want to do kind of a broad overview, and then if we want to do a deeper dive, we can do that, or people can, our board can meet individually with Mr. Limita or department heads, or both. Mr. Kent Thomas?
Mr. Supervisor, what I would like to propose is that we go through and we have the broad overview from the superintendent, and then next month vote on it.
Yeah, we have to approve it by January 1st,
So could we call the broad stroke, the overview, can we have that the last Tuesday? Is that okay with you?
The meeting of October 24th.
Yeah, is that fine?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like I asked on Tuesday, I just want to make sure now if you guys want to have department heads present or not, and it seemed that the consensus was not necessary. They've got their narratives attached to your budget documents. And then if there was any follow-up questions from there, we'd bring them back into the next meeting in November individually and then be able to walk through individual budgets. Is that correct?
I think that'd be good.
When you said narratives, what do you, because I don't have a narrative. And are you talking under the CIP program?
No, there should be, when you go into your budget and you get into it, it'll start off with, that first one is my memorandum to the board
Okay,
about the
I got you.
process.
I know what you're talking about.
And so then each individual one, you'll see the narrative attached to
Yep.
their department.
Now, I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Superintendent, I've been on the phone constantly with a few of the department heads. Still fine with you?
Oh, absolutely. I think the key here is, especially because we have a new board, and it's the first time you guys are walking through this process, and certainly public finance is more nuanced than the private sector that you may be comfortable with. And it's because we have to follow certain rules and regulations that are put upon us by the government for transparency purposes and everything else. Trustee Thomas asked me some great questions. Today we're on the phone probably for about an hour, kind of walking through a bunch of the departments. I would encourage any of you to reach out to individual department heads if you have a concern, or you can bring them straight to me, and I can walk you through the logic behind. I mean, you can see the difference in the budget from what the department head request was and then what my recommendation to the board is. This was the first version. There already has been some changes. We'll tweak it again. My biggest concern is that if you see anything in here that's glaring, Clerk Lane had brought up a question to me earlier this morning, and I did some research on that for you guys. I think it's, if there's something that you see that you really had concerns with, that you think that we're not achieving the board's goals or direction in any one of our departments, whether it's in law enforcement, fire, assessing, finance, DPW, and the DPW budget as enterprise funds, these are all the governmental funds that you get with the general fund and special revenue funds. The DPW budget follows the same format. I mean, it's the exact same format. I did not provide copies to the board of the enterprise funds yet, but that's typical. We go through the governmental funds, and then you'll have this in November to go through the enterprise funds. They're just treated differently. In fact, you don't even have to approve the enterprise funds because they're set up that way that they're there to capture. You don't make a profit on water and sewer or any other enterprise funds. It is to cover the costs, and you have to be able to justify any of the rate increases. It was appropriate with Mr. Russian here earlier to have those conversations. And we can always show you what the balance, what our fund balances are, and what they're earmarked for, what kind of projects we have on the horizon. It has its own capital improvements budget, from equipment replacement to upcoming projects. And but again, it's not like a governmental fund where you guys have to do the deep dive into it. It's that enterprise fund, and it's there to balance. We do use a financial model that was approved by the board, designed by our auditors, Plant Moran, who developed that model that we use that sets our rates for us. And it's pretty complicated. If you really wanted a tutorial on it, let me know, because I'll bring Plant Moran in to describe it to you, and it will be a lengthy process, I assure you. But if I think to not overwhelm the board, we start with the governmental funds. We make sure that we walk through all the various departments. We make sure that we did it right. We're budgeting accordingly. We're getting the goals accomplished that you want accomplished. We're putting the money allocated where you want it. If there was something missing in here that you really, especially as new board members, and you go through and you say, well, why aren't we allocating additional funds for this? Or why don't we put more money towards roads? We hear a lot of complaints about roads. I can do any of those things. I just need board direction. If the board's decision, philosophically was, let's put $500,000 towards roads every year, I'll find, I have to, it's a trade-off. It means we're gonna have to take $500,000 out of something else. It's just that we are still at 83% of our taxable value from where we were before the recession in 2007. So I still think of this as an austerity budget. We're not trying to add a bunch of people. We're not trying to put in a bunch of new programs. We're trying to maintain what we have and maintain the level of services that Grand Blanc Township is known for.
Mr. Massey had his hand up, and then we'll go to Mr. Kent.
I have a couple of questions that I think that are very important to me when it comes to budget. I really want to know what the departmental budget was last year for a given department and what it is this year. I understand that. I'm making a comment here. I understand that. But I don't have much interest in line items because I feel as though that's your responsibility and department head's responsibility. You guys know more about what should be in line items than you can ever explain to me. So when we speak of a broad overview, that's what I'm thinking it's going to be.
Absolutely. You know, we do our budgets by cost center, and we deliver it to you by cost center, so that you can see as a whole whether we're doing the appropriate things. We have the appropriate level of staffing to get the job done, you know, and whether we are able to meet our goals that we've set for each department. One of the reasons that we had each department had to come in and do the presentations to the board as a whole was so that you really could understand what they're charged with, what their roles and functions are, and what their future goals are. And if you agree with the presentations that you heard, then we assume that that's how we should be budgeting. If you have more questions that you think we're going in a direction, I mean, it could be a lot of things. Maybe you think our personnel, we have too many people in a certain department. We can certainly have that conversation. But for the most part, you get that cost center. We say, here it is by cost center. Here's what your assessing department costs you. Here's our labor costs. Here's these. When you see the different line items in your budget, you should know that underneath those, when you pick out you know, those actually get broken down by, you know, another 10, 20 individual line items that make up what you see. If it says office supplies, and you really want to deep dive into it, by all means come and see us and we'll be happy to pull it out. Or if you look at your monthly year-to-date budgets, you'll see some more of that individual breakdown that will show you how it all fits underneath there. Typically, you know, you don't care how many paper clips we're going through, but if one of you had that deep desire to know the breakdown in office supplies, we have that information and we can show you. A lot of those don't get broken out by department. We run them all through finance, for example. All the phone systems run through IT. We're not allocating those out because they're all general fund expenditures. So we can break it out if anybody had some concern, or some of it's going to be a best guess estimate and some, you know, allocation method. But we can certainly do that. Typically, you don't. It's more about, you know, here's the overall. Here's what it looks like. Are we doing the right thing? And that's what I say. I'm happy to answer any question because I sit down you know, just the process so that everybody understands it really starts back in June when they get the letter from me that says, okay, it's time, and Kathy Sostak, as a finance director, puts together, here's the last 3 years data, and they get their own budget broken out by line item of what your budget, you know, what your expenditures, actual expenditures were for the past 3 years. Here's where you're at year to date. What are you projecting? And then what are you asking for in the coming year? So they get that in June and they have to start putting it together. As that gets wrapped up by August, we start holding our meetings one-on-one with me and each department head, and then we walk through it. And when that is completed, that's when my recommendation is finalized and it gets to you by September 1st of every year. We have till December 15th to approve this budget, so we have plenty of time if somebody has questions to go back and revisit, to make adjustments, to do whatever. But we, you know, just think that by December 15th, we need to have the board approve it so that we can move forward.
Mr. Kent?
A couple of things. We talked about on the 24th of October, we would also have kind of the reprint with the adjustments for the contracts that we had, a couple of other things that we've talked about. How far out is this question? We wind up with fund balance because we do the management in this building does a very good job of diligence on the budget, and so we've had an opportunity to have an under expenditure, if you will, so a surplus funds, and we've applied those to our retirement liabilities and OPEB liabilities, as we've talked in the audience here. Is there anything wrong with having a projection for that? I like seeing 0 at the bottom, but I would much rather see a projection of that here's our budget, but we're baking in this $180,000 that we talked about the other Tuesday night from the presentation from MERS, if we can pay another 100, based on the assumptions and based on the performance from 2016, if we pay $180,000 a year for the next 10 years to our retirement liability, we will be 100% funded, okay? Or 100% on track for our rating.
That's a great question.
Can we put that in there? Do you understand what I mean?
I
would
do.
like to see that.
And so, here's my answer to that. In this budget, it's a balanced budget, and we have to deliver to you guys a balanced budget.
Yes.
So, you know, if we were coming up short on revenues for expenditures, we would have to do an appropriation of
Yes.
fund balance.
Yes.
What you see throughout the year, like in our budget amendments, if you recall, in June or July when we did a budget amendment, and we had $1 million in that budget amendment come from fund balance into appropriation
Yes.
so that we can put that on our OPEB
Yes.
liability. We also talked about when we got the CAFR that we had additional $700,000 that is earmarked for putting towards our defined benefit pension
Yes.
liability. The hard part about trying to bake that in is what we really do with that is in the year before it was 500 or 700 and some $1,000 that we had to move. It really is predicated upon, we don't know exactly until we're completely done with that CAFR. We still have bills coming in that are associated with this. So until we get that annual financial audit done, that it comes to us and then we say, okay, what is our fund balance now and where do we need to be? So, you know, it's can we build it in there? I mean, we're delivering a balanced budget with $200,000 going towards OPEB in this budget. Based upon what we know, this is how we think the money's being spent. Now, if revenues come up slightly, if our expenditures are less, but we don't know that really till the end of the year. All the bills have been in, they're paid. It's tougher to make that projection because I just don't have enough money. Now at the end, we sometimes have enough that we can make that motion, make that movement to bring us back down to that fund balance. But it is really hard to do. Like, I can't project that my fund balance will be that higher. We just took it back down to 13% with our projections. Now, you notice we moved that $1 million and earmarked it, and the 700,000 we know about, but we haven't spent that money yet. We don't make those until the end of the year because we need to make sure that nothing catastrophic came up. There wasn't an expenditure that didn't allow us to do that, so we don't make them in the first of the year. That would deplete our fund balance below what the board mandated level is. So you see what I'm saying? Is that, so we don't put that in there. We wait until after we've got the completed financial audit.
And I understand all that, and I know that's how we actually arrive at what our fund balance, our under expenditure for the year is. I just thought, okay, what if, no kidding, our revenues came right in what we projected, and the expenses that we budgeted come in, we would not have that $180,000. So what I'm thinking is, so that the departments, I'd like to find it now, know that it's there. If it comes in at $380,000, that goes on it as well. I mean, there is no reason why the township should keep the 13%. I understand MTA's recommendation, all those kinds of things, but we're paying interest on the money and the liability for our underfunded situation. Our fund balance shouldn't be, in my opinion, it's too high. So it should be paid on those. It's like if you got money to pay on your mortgage, you should be paying it. You shouldn't be putting it in the bank at 1% and paying a mortgage at 3.5%.
So I can do that, but based on those projections, if we wanted to say, and number one, it won't be that full $15,000 a month that we talked
Yes.
about because of that $700,000 we're going to put on there.
Yes.
If you recall, that whole 10-year buy down at that amount equaled $1.8 million. We're going to put $700,000 on it this year, so it's already down to $1.1 million that we need to make up over a 10-year period. Plus the investments, which are, so it's less than $1.1 million.
Yes.
So it would be less than the $15,000, maybe it's $9,000 a month, say, that we need to come
Yes.
up with. I can do that, but it means I'm going to project taking that money out of here. If it's another $120,000, I can do it, but it means we're going to change something in operations. It means I'm not going to fund the planner's position, or we're going to cut dispatch on weekends, or there's a trade-off somewhere for me to project that money in there, because right now you're looking at, this is what we've got, and we've got $200,000 or $209,000 to put towards OPEB. So I will say absolutely I can do that, to put another $100,000 or $180,000 or $120,000, whatever you guys wanted to do. But it is gonna be at a trade-off. It's gonna be, I mean, I can try to tweak small amounts. Oh, it looks like maybe legal fees will be 10,000 less, and I can try to pick it up that way. I mean, it's all possible. But it may mean that I don't, the quickest thing I would do is not fund any new positions. Not that there's a lot in here. There's a planner's position, and there's a part-time or 20-hour-a-week person for IT to help us manage the document storage solutions that we're gonna go to.
All right, I'll back off that position that it needs to be in a line item. I think the board understands my position especially about where surplus funds need to go, and the manager understands that as well. So I don't think it's necessary.
And I think our board is committed to that as
Yes.
well, too, Clark. Mr. Thomas?
When we look at this budget, and I hope everyone's had an opportunity to look at this, Trustee Massey, you said something that kind of piqued my curiosity. This isn't a line item budget. This is not, this is just a broad stroke budget. This has, there is absolutely, you know, when I was going through this, it's not.
Well, we're gonna have a chance to all
And
go
then-
through it in the next couple of meetings, so.
But I understand, and Dennis, and I spoke, I'm sorry, the superintendent and I spoke about this today too, about the OPEB, and my concern is that the roads and the planner, these are all things that we need. We need a planner. I mean, a township our size, just for getting new monies in, we need a planner. But the issue is that we need to put money aside for roads, and where do we take that? Do we cut some police officers, or do we, you know, OPEB? I mean, there's a huge trade-offs. And Dennis made a suggestion that we need to really sit down as a group and find out what our priorities are. When we did our 10 track, I mean, what are our priorities? What, is it OPEB? Is it roads?
Well, I think, you know, we're looking at a couple of different things as far as priorities. I mean,
Right.
in terms of priorities, you know, right now, our priority has been
Paying the bills.
getting our fire department joint agreement straightened out. We've got Parks and Recs. I mean, our priorities aren't necessarily
No, I
where
didn't
we're
mean by
going,
priorities,
where
I'm
we're going to
sorry.
put our money.
Right.
I think, you know,
I
financially, one of our priorities, I believe, I don't know, I might be wrong, but I think, you know, it's being solvent, but then also looking at how do we position ourselves for the future. And I think we've been committed to OPEB and healthcare retirement. Mr. Lemina?
And that's exactly it. My marching orders from the board, from the previous board, were that our biggest concerns are unfunded liabilities, and we need to aggressively go after unfunded liabilities. And that's what we've done. And if you look at, you know, this is the third budget I've delivered to this board, and it's about, okay, we still stick with what I would say is very much an austerity budget, where we're not trying to add, we're not trying to grow programs, we're not doing any of those kind of things. We're very much with an austerity plan that we're maintaining our services that we're at right now. We're not trying to add new services. And then everything that we do to bring down fund balance to the mandated level is going after those two things, our unfunded liability on OPEB and our unfunded liability in pension. And so if the board's priority changed and they suddenly decided, as a group, then you guys need to give me that direction, and I'll say, okay, if it's roads, then instead of $1.7 million on unfunded liability this year, we'll put, $1.7 million on a road, and we won't worry about our liabilities. I would advise against that. But your direction, this budget is to
Based
follow
on-
what the direction is I've received from the board.
Exactly.
If you feel that direction needs to change, then you need to let me know that during the budget session so I can, but right now, I believe that my understanding of what the board has directed me to do since I've been here is stay with an austerity budget, keep things, maintain where we're at. We're not interested in expanding a lot of new programs. It's about maintaining the level of service that we're known for and go after unfunded liabilities.
Right.
Mr. Massey, you've had your
Yes.
hand up.
Trustee Thomas, I don't think you clearly understood the point I was trying to make. Either I was too vague or else you didn't understand. What I was saying, I have no interest in going down to detail stuff. I look at the departmental budget, what it was last year, what it is this year, okay? Because line items is driven by department budget. That's my understanding, okay? So therefore, I don't wanna look at that. If the top number is okay for that department, then I trust you guys to do the line items correctly.
And I think that's what we're going to do, Mr. Massey, and I guess, you know, if people want to dive deeper, they can meet individually with Mr. Limita. Because I think otherwise we'll end up with a series of 3 to 6 hour meetings, you know, going through all that detail.
But trustee Massey, to answer your question, that's what I was pointing out to you, that that's what this is.
Yes.
It's not a line item, it's just,
All right, we got the picture. We're going to go through it, and I don't know, we need to argue about what's in there or what's not, but Mr. Kent, did you have any? I saw your hand.
No, I just, I think Mr. Limita absolutely has heard the board loud and clear. It's what we're responsible for. And I'm gonna say it again, and I know the board knows it. We're not responsible for roads, Mr. Thomas. There's not $1 going in this budget to roads. That's not our responsibility. Genesee County. Our responsibility is the fiducial obligations of this township, and Mr. Limita said it loud and clear. It's unfunded liabilities, unfunded liabilities, unfunded liabilities. That's it, in operating this township.
I was going to wait till later in the meeting under what we're hearing from the community, but I know the community, you know, we do special assessment districts for roads, and I guess, you know, in the past, I think the township participated, what, 25% or something in those?
Yes, sir.
But I don't see how we'd ever get back to being able to do that, especially since we've gone years without it. We would have quite a few residents that would be upset, but so, you know, it's definitely a request that roads get done, but I mean, unless we want to take money from police or fire, and that's what I told people last night, that, you know, where do we, tell me in our budget where we pull it from. You know, what, is it going to come from fire? Is it going to come from police? Is it going to come from, can't take it out of our enterprise funds, obviously. So.
but the road projects that we approved last fall are in here, correct?
We do road projects every year, and we have 50-50 money that,
Right.
you know, that's
Yeah, that's
still
a-
allocated in this budget
That's a
for our
small
50-50 funding.
Oh,
We do some, you know, we do some ditching, we do some road work.
Yeah, but it's-
The county spends, you know, money, doing roads. You know, the biggest thing the biggest challenge is, you guys hear it all the time as elected officials, roads, roads, roads. We heard it last night, you know, you hold a public hearing, open house on the environmental assessment study for the Dort Highway extension, and the biggest questions were, well, when are you gonna pave Pollock Road? And yeah, you should pave more roads, and aren't you guys gonna do something about drainage? You know, you should do something about drainage. Well, that's hard when it was a public hearing on a environmental impact study, but that just tells you the highlight of, that's what's on the tip of people's tongues. It's my road. My road is terrible. We know that, and so that's the priority. That's the trade-off. If this board's philosophy changed and they said, you know, we got to spend money on roads, we can do that, but it's going to come as a cost. Now, you know, it'd be great if our taxable value got back up to where we were in 2007 at least, so that we even had that kind of revenue coming back in. And as we grew that revenue, if you said, you know, the nice thing is we're still attacking our unfunded liabilities, we're still maintaining our service level just like we said we would. Instead of adding new employees and new programs, now that our taxable values come back up, let's start allocating money towards roads. Let's see if we can get to the point where, John Daly told me once last year that $400,000 a year would just keep us, like, our roads wouldn't get any worse, but they most likely wouldn't get any better. We would just be doing enough repairs just to keep up. So maybe if we started getting that values back up, maybe we can allocate, you know, $500,000 a year towards roads and aggressively go after fixing some of the roads, and maybe we can make that extend, because we can do the 25% with subdivisions to try to ease some of that burden and do special assessments. But that is a very big philosophical shift, and we need more revenue if the board's gonna go in that direction.
So I think your budget will reflect the board's wishes, and I think we'll look forward to our discussion at our next meetings. Anything else on our future positioning? Okay. Under operational issues, we have, the board will consider a motion to approve the installation of an SMS access control system integrated into the existing police department system purchased from FBH Architectural Security for $23,254 and authorize township superintendent to execute all related contracts and documents. And this is a budgeted capital project for 2017.
So
And we
moved,
just-
Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
Support.
motion supported, and we discussed this in detail on Tuesday, so I don't know that we need to go into any discussion unless somebody has a question. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item B, the board will consider a motion to approve Rowe Professional Services Company's construction management proposal for Heritage Park Saginaw Road water main looping project for an amount not to exceed $19,950 and authorize the township superintendent to execute all related contracts and documents.
So move.
Support?
Been motion support, any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Operational issue C, the board will consider adopting a resolution for the amendment of the special assessment roll for the Concord Green Special Assessment District to account for the revised estimate for the project in the amount of $508,000, allocated in the amount of $9,584.90 per parcel, not including interest.
So moved.
Support.
Okay, is there any discussion?
Just
No.
do a roll call if it passes.
Okay.
Mr. Kent?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Myself, Mr. Bennett.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, it is unanimous. The board will consider adopting a resolution authorizing the issuance of special assessment bond series 2017, which is a general obligation limited tax, in an amount of $508,000 for the purpose of street repair and repaving in the Concord Green Special Assessment District.
So move.
Okay, is motion support? This is a roll call vote as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Ms. Lane?
Mr. Kent?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Mr. Bennett.
Yes.
Thank you.
With that, we're at the part of our agenda where we just briefly mentioned what things we've heard from the community, and not that we're going to discuss them necessarily, but we'll mention what they are.
A couple
Mr. Kent.
things, Mr. Chairman, if I
Yes.
may. I'm gonna ask for a mulligan here because I'm so old school that we approved the consent agenda where I'm all them years that we approved bills in charts of accounts, under its own motion. I was waiting for that to happen so I could ask a question. So what I'd like to do is be able to ask this question. On 9/29, we wrote a check to Rose Pest Solution for $250. I normally don't, there's just things like that that stick out at me from time to time, but why would we have a check to Rose Pest Solution that's not part of our normal Rose Pest Solution contract? Mr. Chair, or Mr. Treasurer?
I believe that's for this building only. It's not for the whole township. They come into this building.
They do a
and
special kind of
Spread.
thing.
And they check
besides-
this building for,
Mr. Lemata?
They do that, and they also do rodent control in our, out at our pump stations. Because if we don't, we get mice that come in and like to make nests and chew through the wires. So we actually have them go out on a regular basis.
It just stood out at me because I'm thinking, like we would normally see, just like our water contracts and those kinds of things, all of a sudden there's a $250 check.
right.
And I normally would have asked that during the approval of the bills, but now that's a
We'll let you
different,
slide this time.
it's hard to get used to that.
Well, what happens, we wonder why our generators don't kick in.
Yes.
And then we go out there and we find out why our generators didn't kick in.
That's not good.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Yes, Mr.
Could I have the superintendent, because unfortunately the fire chief's not here, but I was wondering if the superintendent would like to talk about the email that you sent out to the trustees today.
Yeah, I can do that. And unfortunately, Chief Burdette had to run. He forwarded an email to me this morning, just giving me a recap of the city council's meeting, and I forwarded it out to the board this morning. It appears that they made a motion. You know, we had asked through Trustee Massey to deliver to the Fire Commission a request that the city consider paying the cost of $7,700 to do the kitchen remodel in Fire Station number 1. It appears that the city council made a motion last night and to not pay that. They want that to stay with the Fire Commission. Of course, that does go against what our agreement is, that you each pay for permanent repairs to your own facilities, and that's unfortunate. I know that Supervisor Bennett and I had a meeting with the mayor and the city manager, and we were told at that time that they weren't going to pay it. But I had also about a week and a half ago sent an email to Wendy Jean Buer, the city manager, and said, you know, we're close to finalizing our millage request for the fire department. I'd hate to see our partnership blow up over a $7,700 permanent repair to Fire Station number 1, because if the city council's not going to pay it, and I understand they're mad because the Fire Commission didn't follow the city's protocol of telling them in January that they wanted the city to pay for it and putting on a capital improvement list, is what I got the gist of from the emails. But if they're not going to pay it, that means the township taxpayers paid 86% of a permanent repair to the city, and yet we pay 100% of the permanent repairs to our own facilities.
Yes.
And I don't understand the logic behind it. I understand being upset about that the Fire Commission apparently maybe didn't follow the protocol, but according to Chief Burdette, he wasn't aware of that protocol. And you know, I got some concerns, and you know, the board's going to have to take that into consideration as we move forward. And we're trying to work through the ideas of our joint partnership moving forward. And that's all. I haven't had a conversation with the city yet. I know that she had contacted Supervisor Bennett, or the mayor had contacted Supervisor Bennett today, but it's probably something you guys are going to have some conversation with city council on.
Mr. Lehman, I'm not sure where I heard this from, but I thought I heard that, and I know we had a discussion at the beginning of the meeting about whether or not we lease any of our, or if the fire department leases any of our properties. And the answer was, no, we don't lease our properties to the fire department. Was there some discussion that the city council had? And I know there's nobody here that could answer that, but
Paula says she's got it.
It was
that they lease their property to the fire department, therefore they're not going to pay for it because of that.
I've never seen any. I've never seen a payment coming out of the Fire Commission budget for lease payments, and I think that may have been Attorney Griffin's just the language that he chose when he was walking them through that scenario. I'm not aware, and I've certainly gone through their budget at, you know, enough times. I've never seen an actual payment that goes back on a lease payment for that building, so I don't believe that that's the case at all. It certainly isn't here. And our understanding and agreement always has been that you funded your own permanent repairs, like the $74,000 that the township funded on the fire training tower. In fact, I mean, over the last
When was that we repaired the tower at our expense?
2 years ago. In the last, between 2011 and 2016, the township board authorized $174,496 in repairs to fire station number 2 and number 3.
And those are both our fire stations located in the township.
Those are the township buildings that we paid, that we didn't pass those costs along on to the fire commission.
So for
$174,496.
Just so the
That includes
public,
fire tower also, or not?
Yeah.
That includes the fire tower.
All of it, right?
for the public's, just so they get a picture, we're talking about that Fire Station 1 is in the city, and a kitchen was put in for a cost of around $8,000 roughly. And we're asking the city to pay for that expenditure that the fire department made out of their budget at this time, and we've had an agreement that each entity pay their own capital expenditures for their building repairs. Yeah, Mr. Kent?
In going back to the inception of the fire commission, and through both Laddies, Mr. Laddie and his father, has advised this board that the commission does not own property, can't under the statute, correct? And so maybe that's just a choice of words that he used incorrectly too, in terms of saying that the commission owns that building, because they in fact do not.
Correct.
Mr. Thomas?
For the public and for my fellow board members, the letter, the email that that we all received, it states that Attorney Griffin states that the fire commission is leasing the building from the city. And the way I look at it is that we're good neighbors. Maybe we are good neighbors. And like I've always said, we're stronger together as a group. We should always be that way. But at times, there's a time and a place for things to be fair. And for Grand Blanc Township citizens, taxpayers, to pay 86% of a kitchen in a building that is owned by the Grand Blanc City, that's not fair. That is just absolutely not fair. The fire commission is made up of 2 representatives from the township, 2 representatives from the city, and 1 at large, correct? So when the fire commission went to the Grand Blanc City and said, okay, we have to put a kitchen in, this is your building, you have to pay for it, 2 of those people were appointed by the mayor or the city council, like Mr. Bennett appoints Trustee Massey and
Todd Barnes.
Mr. Barnes. So we've been working, I'm on the task force for the fire department, or for the fire millage. And there's a lot of people on this board that have put in hundreds, and I'm not making this up, hundreds of hours working on this. Mr. Bennett, true?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak, members, Mr. Massey, and Ms. Lane, hundreds of hours. And plus, on top of that, is that Chief Burdette?
Oh, good.
It is.
You must have heard the fire bell.
And on top of that, Chief Burdette, could you come up to the podium, please? Before I'd like to come back to what I want to get around to.
Okay.
Chief Burdette, could you please tell the fire task force what happened at the city council meeting last night in regards to the millage and in regards to your email about the attorney saying that the commission leases the building?
Oh, sure. The city attorney gave his opinion to the city council that the city basically leases the building to the fire department, and as such, they are the landlords of that building, and they're responsible for the structure and the grounds. However, with the kitchen remodel being done prior to the city being asked for the funds, or the city was not aware or being asked for the funds, that it's gratis work and that the kitchen is free.
Was there anything else brought up about the millage?
The millage itself
I'm sorry.
came out that a lot of discussion occurred with this, that they decided last night to wait until they heard or received the written opinion from our attorney on the millage wording, I guess.
Yeah, and I think the only wording we're coming up with is the wording that we've already pretty much stated in terms of where we stand on the millage. Mr. Laddie?
I'm working on 2 aspects of it. First of all, it's the ballot language for the
Right.
township to consider. And then the second is what potential changes may be needed in our existing fire commission ordinance. And I have a draft of a number of items that we've been talking about over the past several months. There's no language in there about a lease. There is language that tries to clarify that the buildings that are owned by the respective municipalities are the responsibility of those municipalities for fixed improvements. And as we talked about at our last meeting, my deadline to get that proposed ordinance language to you and the ballot language is your meeting on the 24th. You'll have it in advance of that. And then at that point, you decide what to do with it. If you want to, I don't know if you need to forward the ballot language on. If you want to, that's fine. But I think we should forward on proposed amendments to the ordinance.
Okay.
But I want you to have a chance to look at them and consider them and talk about them before we send them on.
Okay. And Mr. Thomas, you know, I
Can I finish what I was gonna say?
but yeah, I just wanted to say that, you know, I think being fair is correct, you know, that, it's great to be good neighbors, but we have to be, we're representing our township residents. Go ahead.
Mr. Lehman?
Yes?
What? Is there a question
Mr. Supervisor, I would like to make a motion.
with regard to,
I would like to make a motion that at this time, that we direct our attorney to form language to dissolve our partnership in the Grand Blanc Township Fire Commission. And I would like to direct the superintendent to form an RFP to set up sleeping and cooking arrangements and what we have to accomplish to move firefighters to station number 2 and station number 3. If this is the language, this is language that I'm asking to be set up.
Mr. Chair,
yes, Mr. Massey?
I clearly opposed to that.
Oh, hold on, there's souls in a second, so.
What?
There, well, we can discuss it, but is there a second?
I'll support
much?
that.
Okay, Ms. Lane supports it. Go ahead, Mr.
I
Massey.
clearly opposed to that. We're already we're preparing to go into negotiation with Grand Blanc City. At least the attorneys are, okay?
What
So.
are we negotiating?
Hey, let Mr.
Oh, I'm
Massey
sorry.
speak.
I'm sorry.
So, since that's the plan, there's no need to move forward with anything new at this time.
Let me ask a question for clarification, Mr. Laddie. Mr. Laddie, the language that you're putting together, I assume would have a dissolution. I mean, any agreement you put together typically would have a clause for dissolution, or?
My proposed agreement will have language for a proposed dissolution.
Okay. I think what,
Now, that could be enacted. In other words, it's not gonna initiate that, a dissolution. It's just gonna have language in the event that
okay.
either party wants to dissolve.
And if I hear Mr. Thomas correctly, I think what you're asking for is a separate document that would call for the dissolution of the joint fire department at this time and investigate through an RFP the cost to incorporate sleeping quarters and kitchen into either fire station 2 or 3. So that's your motion. Kind of
Yes,
the
sir.
gist of where you're going with it. So it isn't, you're not looking for it to be built into the language, you're looking for something separate. Now, do we have further discussion? I know Mr. Massey, go ahead.
That's my argument.
That we're negotiating right now and that.
Yes, we don't need any other obstacles in the path right now.
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Mr. Supervisor Bennett? My question is, what are we negotiating?
Yeah. Let me ask for clarification from our fire chief, if I could. Was there any discussion last night? I've heard that there was mention that of having their own fire department or something like this in the city.
There was a comment made last night about having the city having their own fire department, yes.
Mm-hmm.
That was,
Was there a motion to that
there
effect?
was no motion at all, no. It was just a comment that was made.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay?
Can I ask the chief a question?
Sure, go ahead.
Chief, was there a question, that comment, that was made by a council person, correct?
Yes, it
Wasn't
was.
To form their own fire department?
Yes.
And wasn't there also a comment last night about why don't they just pay us for whatever they think they should pay us per run?
There was a comment about doing a fee for service. And again, that was a comment, and one of the other discussion points that was made was whether they would lose their voice on the commission as part of the fire department, which was confirmed through the attorney that yes, they would.
Chief, I know that you speak with a lot of chiefs all over the state of Michigan, and I applaud you for that. But with our fire commission, us paying for the $8,000 and change, the fire commission paying for that. But yet, I know, I've been on the board since, December, so bear with me. But Trustee Kent, when you were on the fire commission, we built how much was a training tower?
Well, we didn't build, the training tower was built long before the inception of the commission, but we built a station out on Baldwin Road,
No,
Station 2, or Station 3.
No, I'm talking about the training tower. Didn't we
This
just
training
rework-
tower's been in here since
No,
80s.
but
80s, yeah.
Didn't we put some money towards that?
Yes, yeah, 2 years ago,
That's what I'm asking.
$75,000.
$75,000. And do you remember at the time on how much the city paid for that?
Zero,
I'm sorry.
nothing.
I think, we need to have some discussion about, Mr. Thomas's proposed resolution. Mr. Kent?
I gotta tell you, the emotions are high right now. Firefighting's not like road plowing or mosquito abatement. Firefighting is public safety, probably equal to or law enforcement, somebody could argue, right? But you get the idea, it's public safety. I understand Mr. Thomas's emotion. I understand the whole feeling about this whole business. But I gotta tell you, it seems how you brought it up, Mr. Thomas. I was on the fire commission for 11 years. Mr. Burdette would be better to answer this, but the demographics of who are our on-call folks, it used to be, most of them were that lived in the proximity of one. You guys keep in mind, we want to talk about 1 mil sustaining this fire department. The ramifications of an action like that I don't think anybody, Mr. Limita, you're a smart guy. You could put it together, don't get me wrong, but I'm going to tell you 1 mil won't cover it. Because you're not going to get, and again, Mr. Burdette, I'm going back to when I was on there before. The location right now, the response to our 2 stations, to have on-call people would probably be unfeasible to the less than 7-minute response time that we are trying to achieve and have achieved. So without totally full-time staff in both buildings. Let's not throw the baby out here with the bathwater. I mean, I like our negotiations. I like our, hard responses that we're having, but holy cow, folks, to dissolve this thing and think that tomorrow we can just operate out of both buildings and all we do is pay 86% of the fire department budget is really short-sighted.
My motion though, Trustee Kent, wasn't to dissolve it. My motion
I thought
is
it
to-
was.
No, my motion is to have language.
Well, that was already happening, right?
Right.
No, this is separate language. This
What
is,
Mr. Kent is calling for is to come up with language to dissolve it immediately.
Mr. Thomas, not Mr. Kent.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Mr. Thomas is asking for, I believe, language to dissolve it at this time.
I just want the language set. No, what I'm asking for is the language to dissolve it, not to vote on dissolving it.
Okay.
I would like the language written up. I apologize. I want the language written up for the dissolvent so we can see what it looks like. And then I asked the superintendent to form an RFP to see what it would look like on what it would take and what it would cost us to move us into
Either
Station
2 or
2 and 3. I'm not calling for the board this night to dissolve the commission. I'm asking for language.
Mr. Laddie?
And I'm preparing that language without consideration of any decision or idea that you would dissolve the fire department or the fire commission. I just think that, and it existed in our original agreement that we lived under for a decade plus.
Yes.
I don't think it's offensive language to put in there. I don't think it's not inflammatory language. It's just, it's putting back in what we had before.
Yes.
So that both parties understand the process, because it's not an easy process. Forgetting the practical points that Mr. Kent pointed out, it would be a long accountant-laden process. And it should be there. Everyone should know that this is not something that's going to carry on in perpetuity if it's not cared for. And so you'll see that language in the proposed agreement. But let's, so just, I hate that, I don't want to be repetitive, but this is not in any way a trigger to dissolve the fire commission.
No, I'm asking for language, if we do dissolve, or when we dissolve. And I'm asking for our next game plan to set up for the RFPs to outfit Station 2 and Station 3.
Go ahead, Mr. Lehman.
If that motion were to move forward, I would prefer that you, instead of an RFP, like we're sending it out, would allow me to prepare cost estimates of what that would look like versus
Exactly.
a request for proposal and sending it out.
Mr. Laddie and Mr. Lehman, a question that I have is, the township has stated where we feel we need to be with the millage, and we're moving forward with that language. We're going to approve the ballot language in the next month, and it will move forward to a ballot next year.
I think it's too early.
What's that? If the city fails to act or move forward on any type of ballot language, what's the net result? I mean, we move forward with ours, but we haven't heard from the city on where they're at with their half of this joint operation. I mean, does the dissolution automatically kick in that's in the current agreement? Or, I mean, I know the clock is ticking on the current millage, we have another year left on that.
Right, yeah, it isn't, I don't necessarily think, I mean, I'm, right now, my focus will be to get something that reflects the needs of the township in the partnership. Okay, understanding, within the context of the partnership, we need to have certain things spelled out, we need to have certain processes spelled out. We also need to pay attention to our funding mechanism. We know to maintain the level of service that we currently have and to actually improve that slightly is going to take a different funding source from us. And we are going to be asking that question of our voters with or without the city asking the same thing of their voters. But I think what you should wait for is wait till you see the proposed changes to the ordinance. Wait till you see the proposed millage language. And then decide. And as to the motion that's on the table, I'm already doing part one of that motion. And I'm not necessarily sure you need a motion to direct Mr. Limita to come up with some rough estimates of what it would take to staff one of the other buildings. I'm not sure you need that official action to get those two things done.
Mr. Thomas, would it be acceptable to you and Ms. Lane if we just simply by consensus ask our superintendent to come up with those estimates?
It's agreeable to me if it's understood that that's what we're asking for. And it appears that both Attorney Laddie and Mr. Lehman understand what Mr. Thomas has clarified during this discussion.
What,
Is that acceptable to you, Mr. Thomas? Mr. Massey?
Mr. Chair, probably I'm thinking too far in advance. It seems like the discussion here tonight is we're negotiating something that, in my opinion, should not happen. The attorney has clearly stated that what he's putting together is going to encompass all of that.
Right.
So why should we move with something else?
Well, I think we're
That's
coming
what
to,
we're
I
just
think we're coming
saying
to a
right now,
consensus that
Mr.
we're
Massey.
going to go
We're
along with what
taking
our
it-
attorney
we're
is
gonna listen
drafting.
for his language.
So I think we're going that direction, actually.
So you're asking the maker of the motion and the second if they'll rescind the motion.
Yes, I'm willing
As long
to
as
do
we're in
that.
agreement that
there's
you're going
consensus.
to form language to dissolve the commission,
For the potential.
for the potential. And
Yes.
that the superintendent is going to put together a
Cost estimate.
cost estimate.
Yes, those two things will be done.
Thank you.
Okay.
So you agree
Yes.
to rescind your motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Can we stipulate that we have that for next meeting?
You'll have that before next meeting.
Okay. A couple of things I just want to mention that I'm hearing, and I appreciate you bringing up the fire issue, Mr. Thomas. I mean, it's, I was thinking that we'd bring it up under management reports, but it's fine. We covered it. Anything else on fire before we move on? Because I don't want to cut that discussion short, but I think
Mr. Chair, we've had enough
Okay.
discussion.
All right, very good. I'm confident that we're moving forward. Just a couple of things. Hill Road and I-475, wanted to tip my hat to our DPW and the Road Commission. One of the things that had noticed over a period of time was the overpass over 475, the rubble and what have you that had collected in the center median. Our DPW crew went out there and swept that off with the cooperation of the Road Commission, and I believe we removed 4 tons of rubble from that overpass area. So if you drive over that overpass now, they cut the weeds and everything else growing up in that median, and it looks very nice. So appreciate that work. And then we'll go to board reports. So Mr. Mansour, I think everybody realizes that the unfortunate passing of his father. He's tending to family. Parks and Rec, Mr. Thomas, anything to report?
We're meeting next Thursday. Last meeting was canceled because of, we did not have a quorum.
Okay. And our task force will begin meeting on that issue as well with Parks and Rec. Mr. Massey, anything else on fire to report from the commission meeting?
No, we've had enough tonight.
Mr. Kent, anything to report?
Board of Zoning Appeals will meet next Tuesday, and Police Commission will meet 2 weeks from 2 nights ago.
Okay.
It's 24th.
Okay. Mr. Guzak?
No, we're all.
Ms. Lane?
Nothing.
Okay. Just a couple of quick hits here. We had grand opening for CNX, and I don't know if you were going to comment on that, Mr. Limita, or fabulous to have them coming to our township. I think I showed everybody the ad that we put in this source booklet that gets distributed throughout the state, actually, for individuals and businesses considering coming to our community. We've met with the PGA, and there's some exciting things. I'll let Dennis, if he has anything he wants to share from that, but looking forward to the PGA event coming to Grand Blanc, and they're making preliminary plans. And I think when they start announcing some of the new twists they're going to add on the tournament, it should be very exciting and
Are they
draw.
really put a windmill out there for the putt-putts?
I haven't heard that, but there's some other exciting stuff. One thing that I want to distribute to the board too, that I'll email out to you tonight, is an article that actually the Road Commission put in their packet for the next Roads and Bridges meeting. And the title of the article is, "Why Does Verizon Care About Telephone Poles?" And one of the things that we've discussed here at our board is along the right-of-ways, placing equipment on telephone poles, and why that's important to the cellular companies. Last night, yes?
One thing I would like the public to know is Halloween is coming, if you didn't know that. It's going to be October 31st, and people are starting to call, and I should have mentioned this
That's okay.
earlier. Trick-or-treating is between 6 and 8 throughout the entire township.
Thank you. The Dort Highway public hearing was last night, as we mentioned earlier in the meeting. It was a full house last night in the police department's conference room, and some good input, a lot of concerns over other road issues than the Dort Highway extension, but everybody was able to speak their piece, and I think that will go back to the feds for their approval, I believe, or the state, and we'll be hearing back on on that, but it looks like probably next summer we'll start to see dirt moving on that project. Mr. Limita?
Couple things. The PGA Tour, we've been starting to do some preliminary meetings with the advanced people on that. It's going to be really exciting to have PGA Caliber Golf Champions Tour back here. There are some really cool announcements coming, but I don't want to steal their thunder. I think you'll hear it at the end of October, beginning of November. But it is really cool. The Connects Motion, we did their open house last week out on Embry Road, and that is just exciting to have these guys here. I mean, between having Laird come in and open their doors with a $14 million expansion, have these guys come together. It's Continental and next year bringing 30 engineers together to work on automotive technologies. We got to experience a model for an autonomous vehicle. I just want to say that don't ride with Chief Wiles if he's piloting an autonomous vehicle at any time soon. It would make you question his driving ability. And I also was down in Lansing today for oral arguments in the Supreme Court in regards to the big box store valuation cases. Most of you know that I've been fighting this battle since about 2011 when it started up north. And we finally had a day in court. They did our oral arguments on the city of Escanaba versus Menards, which is a test case that we finally got through there. I don't know what will happen. We'll find out sometime probably between 4 weeks and 6 months from now when they decide to determine what it is that they want to do. But basically what happened was Menards challenged the assessment valuation like all big box stores have in Michigan with the city assessors. They went to the Michigan Tax Tribunal where they prevailed. The Court of Appeals ruled in the city of Escanaba's favor. So for the first time ever, we had a rule of law against the big box dark store valuation. And basically it takes a $10 million store and values it at the price of the dirt because they claim that it actually has no value other than dirt. That it's built specifically to be that big box store and could be used for nothing else. Unfortunately, they use a sales comparison method against the either closed stores or stores that have deed restrictions that will not allow them to be big box retailers anymore. That they put these deed restrictions on there, which absolutely hurts the value, and the Michigan Tax Tribunal has not agreed up to this point. The Supreme Court did agree to hear oral arguments on the briefs. It was interesting. Justice Bernstein asked quite a few good questions, I thought, to the city of Escanaba's attorney. Now it's just to wait and see whether they're going to take the case and ask it, or they may reject it, in which case would be the best case scenario. It means that the Court of Appeals opinion stands and it gets remanded back to MTT. Not that we're going to make any changes. It's not going to mean that our big box store's value is going to come back up, but it will stop anything moving forward that comes, and so that'd be a good thing. That's all I got.
Mr. Laddie?
The only thing that I want you to consider possibly in the future, and we've already dealt with the issue I think that Dr. Daly is going to talk about with Verizon and the polls. We had an application that came in under wasn't disguised as a Metro Act application, but it was for one of those small cell arrays that wanted to go on a telephone pole. We've been working well with the Road Commission on trying to spot applications that aren't truly Metro Act cable applications. I'll just use that as the easiest way to describe it. When we considered the applicant's request, we created an agreement specifically for them that would allow them to locate on an existing pole, but there was a franchise fee that they were going to have to pay, and they have not agreed to that franchise fee as of this date. What I'm thinking about doing, and I've had some conversations with Mr. Limita and Giffords Webster, is the states some of the communities on the west side of the state have adopted an ordinance to process these kinds of applications. And I think that might be something we want to consider, although the landscaping, the landscape legally on the federal level and the state level is going to be changing fairly quickly, I think. But I may submit to you a model ordinance for you to consider. It wouldn't go through our zoning ordinance because it would be more akin to a franchise agreement, but it may be something that we should continue to think about because again, based on the article and based on discussions from the road commission, these things, depending on where you are, these are coming at you fast and furious. And we've had one so far that we know of, and we might as well be ready if more come. So I may whip something up for you to take a look at. It's lower on my list of priorities than the fire commission. No, strike that. My first priority is coffee with Mr. Russian, and secondly, the fire commission, and then third. But we'll get it to you sometime in the next month and a half or so.
One thing that I want to bring up too, that we've been getting lots of issue or calls on is Embury Road, the intersection of Embury and Grand Blanc. I've noticed it myself, the traffic is backed up there probably halfway down the road to Cook Road. And in previous months it's been backed up at only a certain hours, and now it's backing up for a longer period of time and a much longer line. And as development grows in that area, I mean, we have a new business on Embury Road. I believe that Mr. Sears has requested a traffic study at that corner. Mr. Lehman, do you want to comment on that at all? Or?
We know that there's some challenges around other parts, but this really came to light because we do have new business opened up there, and it's taken them up to 15 minutes to take a left-hand turn to, by the time they get up their turn up to the corner, and there's just certain times that are bad. It's probably going to warrant, they'd asked about a light, but it's so close to the corner of Grand Blanc and Dort that I don't know how you'd put another light at Embry, so I don't know what the solution will be there, to be honest with you, but they have initiated the traffic study, and I'm sure that the road commission will be responsive based upon the results of that traffic study with helping us with some type of traffic enforcement or a way to address the traffic issues there.
Maybe even needing a traffic person there to direct traffic.
Just forward that, we're doing open.
That's in Mr.
Hill, do you have
Chief
any?
Wiles'
Yeah, we have
department.
Mr. Hill here from the road commission. Any thoughts or comments while we have you here? Okay, all right.
What about the surface of Hill Road between Delsey and Center?
Yeah, we had a question the other evening, Mr. Hill, on the surface of Hill Road. It was recently resurfaced, and individuals mentioned that they thought the left center or the center turn lane was a different type of material or different format or something. Is that true, or?
Again, that's my maintenance department did that. I'm not sure I would doubt that'd be different material, but I could look into it.
Okay.
Plus, the overall surface of the road, from a resurfacing standpoint, seems to be very liney and porous. It's really
Rough.
that's a really well, not rough from a traveling standpoint, but the surface just looks really poor. Like it's going to store water and crumble in the winter. You know what I mean? So.
Okay.
Can I ask
Sure.
Supervisor Bennett or any sent an email to myself, so I would remember to look into it tomorrow?
Sure. We'll make sure Mr. Lehman sends that email.
Thanks.
Or one of us will. Okay.
Make a motion to read.
Okay, motion to adjourn. Support?
Support.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So did Tristan get enough information?